For 4 straight days, the man who now holds the reins of the most dangerous government in the Middle East said absolutely nothing. No video message, no audio clip, no press appearance, not a single public word. Iran's newly appointed Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei was formally selected on March 8th. His own succession ceremony filled the streets of Tehran with hundreds of thousands of people waving portraits because there was no living figure to cheer for in person. They held up photographs of his face. That was all they had. Then, on Thursday, March 12th, he finally spoke. And what he said did not pull this war even one step closer to resolution. It pushed any realistic path to peace so far out of reach that many analysts now believe we have crossed into a new, much longer, and far more dangerous chapter. His message arrived not in a live broadcast, not in a recorded address from a secure location, but in the form of a written statement read word for word by a state television anchor. Because even 4 days after his appointment, Mojtaba Khamenei has still not appeared on camera. In that statement, he delivered 4 core declarations that every major capital on earth is dissecting right now with growing alarm. First, the Strait of Hormuz must remain closed. He described it explicitly as a tool to pressure the enemy. Not a temporary blockade, not a short-term tactic, a standing tool, something to be used repeatedly until demands are met. Second, every American military base across the Middle East must shut down immediately. If they do not, he warned, those bases will be attacked. Third, Iran has already conducted detailed studies on opening entirely new war fronts, places and methods where, in his words, the enemy has little experience and is highly vulnerable. He left the locations and nature of those fronts deliberately unspecified. The vagueness itself is the warning. Fourth, and this is why so many people are watching this channel right now, the 3 explicit conditions Iran has placed on the table before it will even consider ending the war. When you read those 3 demands carefully, when you match them against what the United States and its allies have repeatedly stated as non-negotiable red lines, the conclusion becomes unavoidable. This is no longer a conflict searching for an off-ramp. This is a conflict being deliberately structured for prolongation. Before I walk you through every word of those 3 demands, before I explain exactly why each one is politically, strategically, and domestically impossible for Washington to accept, and before I show you how this deadlock is already rewriting oil prices, fertilizer costs, grocery bills, shipping insurance, and the value of retirement accounts around the world, please hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. This situation is evolving faster than almost any story I've tracked. The next 48 to 72 hours could determine whether quiet diplomacy still has oxygen, or whether we are watching the early stages of a multi-year regional war with global economic consequences. You need to be here when the next development breaks. Let me first give you the human context that explains the tone of what was said. Mojtaba Khamenei is 56 years old. He became Supreme Leader on March 8th, 10 days after the February 28th joint U.S.-Israeli airstrikes that killed his father, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, his mother, his wife, and his son in a single compound. Mojtaba himself was seriously injured in that attack. Fractured foot, shrapnel wounds to the leg. He has not been seen in public since. When the most powerful man in Iran communicates only through a typed document read by someone else after 4 days of total silence, intelligence services around the world do not simply read the words, they perform forensic analysis, the sequence of points, what is emphasized, what is omitted, the exact phrasing chosen for domestic consumption versus international ears. So let me take you through the statement the way Langley, Tel Aviv, Saudi, and Abu Dhabi analysts are reading it tonight.
He began with a sweeping vow of revenge. Iran will not refrain from avenging the blood of its martyrs. He singled out the March 1st strike on a girls' school in Minab, southern Iran. Iranian state media and UN investigators put the death toll between 165 and 180, mostly school children. The United Nations Human Rights Office described it as one of the single deadliest civilian incidents of the entire conflict. CNN sourcing pointed toward U.S. involvement. Both Washington and Jerusalem issued denials. Then came the strategic escalation in language. Every person killed in this war is an independent case for revenge. Not one retaliatory operation to close the book, not a proportional response. Every single death, combatant or civilian, creates its own permanent obligation for retaliation. Consider the current numbers. The UN Refugee Agency reports 3.22 million people displaced inside Iran alone since February 28th. That is 3.22 million individual human stories of loss, injury, destroyed homes, buried family members. Mojtaba Khamenei just told his people that each of those stories remains an open file demanding blood. That is not rhetoric designed to prepare the ground for compromise. Next, he addressed the Strait of Hormuz head-on. Certainly, the lever of blocking the Strait of Hormuz must continue to be used. He went further. It must be used as a tool to pressure the enemy. Present tense, ongoing, not will be used until, not we will lift the closure when. A deliberate policy instrument to be kept active. Within minutes of the anchor finishing the reading, Brent crude, which had eased toward $90 after the IEA's emergency drawdown of 400 million barrels, spiked back above $100. Markets understood instantly, this is not a short-term disruption, this is declared Iranian strategy. He then turned to the Gulf Arabs. He told Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, close every American military facility on your territory. American security guarantees, he said, are nothing more than a lie. While Iran has no intention of attacking those countries directly, bases hosted on their soil will continue to be struck. To prove the threat was not theoretical, Iran, or its proxies, acted hours before the statement even aired. A container ship struck by projectile off Dubai, massive fire on Bahrain's Muharraq Island near the international airport, drone impact on a residential building in Kuwait, wounding 2 civilians, Dubai air defenses firing twice to intercept incoming threats, Saudi forces downing a drone over Riyadh's diplomatic quarter. 5 Gulf countries hit in one night. The message landed. Then the line that caused the sharpest intake of breath among analysts. Studies have been conducted regarding the opening of other fronts in which the enemy has little experience and is highly vulnerable. Activating them will take place if the state of war continues and if it serves our interests. No names, no map references, no timeline. Just the promise that options exist, options Washington cannot easily predict or defend against. That studied ambiguity is itself the psychological weapon. Now we arrive at the heart of today's update, the 3 ceasefire conditions officially announced yesterday by President Masoud Pezeshkian after consultations with Vladimir Putin and several regional governments. These are not anonymous leaks, not back-channel feelers, public, on-the-record demands from the government of Iran. Condition 1. Recognition of Iran's legitimate rights to the full nuclear fuel cycle, meaning unrestricted domestic uranium enrichment and the complete nuclear program under sole Iranian sovereignty. No new international restrictions, no enhanced IAEA oversight, no revival or replacement of the JCPOA framework that gives Washington veto power. Why is this impossible for the United States? Because the public justification for launching Operation Epic Fury on February 28 was crystal clear: permanent elimination of Iran's pathway to nuclear weapons. President Trump stated it repeatedly. Defense Secretary Hegseth echoed it in every briefing. 9 American service members have been killed and 140 wounded in pursuit of that objective. To accept Condition 1 would require the U.S. government to stand before the American people and say those lives were sacrificed in vain, that the nuclear threat we went to war to remove will now be formally legitimized. No administration can survive that political hit. Condition 2. Financial reparations for all damage caused by U.S. and Israeli strikes since February 28. Military sites, civilian infrastructure, hospitals, schools, economic losses across the board. No specific figure has been named publicly, but consider the scale already admitted in CENTCOM briefings. More than 5,500 separate targets struck, Natanz and Fordo enrichment halls reduced to rubble, Revolutionary Guard Command nodes decapitated, ballistic missile inventories degraded by over 86%. No United States government, under any party, has ever paid war reparations to an adversary during or after active conflict. Doing so would require congressional authorization, would amount to an admission of legal liability for civilian casualties, including the Minab school, and would open the Treasury to endless claims. The political and constitutional barriers are absolute. Condition 3, binding internationally enforceable guarantees, ratified under international law and verified by the United Nations, that neither the United States nor Israel will ever again use military force against Iran. A U.S. president signing such a commitment would require Senate ratification as a treaty. Imagine asking a Senate that has just buried American service members to grant Iran a permanent legal shield against future attack. Israel, whose core national security doctrine for decades has been prevention of an existential Iranian threat, would have to affix its signature to a document promising never to act against the state that has spent 40 years developing missiles, drones, and proxy networks explicitly designed to destroy it. That is not a negotiated settlement. That is capitulation framed as diplomacy. So the honest question every serious observer is asking tonight: are these 3 conditions Iran's genuine bottom line, or are they an inflated opening bid meant to be bargained down in secret? There is a credible case for the latter view. Let's examine it fairly. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff transmitted 2 formal proposals to Tehran on March 10th. Iran has not publicly rejected the channel. When a government wants zero negotiation, it usually refuses even to receive messages. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi told PBS this week that Iran is prepared to talk and that guarantees would be required. Notice he did not say the 3 conditions are immutable in every detail. Diplomatic phrasing always leaves room. Russia matters enormously here. Pezeshkian spoke directly with Putin before the public announcement. The Kremlin readout emphasized Russia's support for de-escalation. Russia has real leverage over Iran: economic, military, diplomatic. And if Putin decides a prolonged war harms Russian interests, he can apply pressure Tehran cannot easily ignore. Most importantly, Iran is losing the conventional war badly. Missile launches are down 86% from opening levels. The surface navy has been effectively neutralized. Nuclear facilities are in ruins. A government facing that level of degradation usually has powerful incentives to find a dignified exit. Yet here is where the optimistic reading hits a wall. Mojtaba Khamenei's first public statement was not sprinkled with subtle signals of flexibility. It was written in pure defiance for an Iranian street that has watched its capital bombed, its leadership assassinated, its children buried under rubble.
Reuters is quoting multiple senior Iranian insiders saying the new leadership circle is shifting toward a more radical direction. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps now exercises full control. Alex von Tanka, one of the most respected Iran analysts at the Middle East Institute in Washington, said it plainly. Mojtaba owes his position to the Revolutionary Guards. He is not going to be as supreme as his father was. His father could rein in the IRGC when necessary. Mojtaba cannot. The Guards govern through him. That structural reality changes everything. Even if Mojtaba personally wanted compromise, he lacks the authority to deliver it against IRGC resistance. This is no longer primarily a story about maps, missiles, and diplomacy. It is already a story about your money. When the war began on February 28th, Brent crude traded near $80 a barrel. After Mojtaba's statement declaring the strait closure an ongoing policy tool, Brent is once again above $100, and several desks, including Goldman Sachs, are modeling $150 plus if mines remain in the water and Hormuz stays functionally closed for more than a few additional weeks. At $150 oil, average U.S. pump prices climbed to $5.50 to $6 per gallon nationwide. That is hundreds of extra dollars leaving household budgets every month. Fertilizer is the next link in the chain most coverage is missing. Qatar, one of the planet's largest producers of nitrogen-based fertilizers, has already slashed output after strikes on key facilities. Roughly 30% of global ammonia production is now at direct risk from continued conflict. American Midwest spring planting is 4 to 6 weeks away. Farmers are finalizing input purchases right now. Elevated fertilizer prices or outright shortages mean smaller harvests this fall. The resulting increases in bread, cereal, meat, and dairy will reach supermarket shelves by late summer and will not be temporary sticker shock. They will reflect structurally reduced global supply. Your investment accounts are feeling it too. Veteran Wall Street analyst Ed Yardeni assigns a 35% probability to a conflict-driven stock market meltdown. J.P. Morgan Chase has already flagged at least a 10% drawdown as baseline. The S&P 500 has dropped 7.3% since February 28th, and today's statement added fresh selling pressure to energy-sensitive sectors, consumer discretionary, industrials, airlines, manufacturing. The UNHCR's latest figure, 3.22 million internally displaced inside Iran alone. Add 800,000 more displaced in Lebanon. No leader presiding over that scale of human suffering can return to his people with an agreement that smells like defeat. The pressure inside Iran pushes the three conditions toward rigidity, not flexibility. None of this arrived without warning signs. 6 months before the first bombs fell, classified assessments, later shared with congressional oversight, reported Iran pre-positioning naval mines and fast attack craft squadrons in the southern Gulf, specifically anticipating U.S. military action. 12 months earlier, the IAEA's confidential report stated that Iran already possessed enough enriched uranium, if further processed, to produce multiple nuclear weapons. 2 years ago, a reformist voice inside Iran's Assembly of Experts told the BBC on Background that Ayatollah Ali Khamenei had explicitly ruled out Mojtaba as successor. Yet the strikes came. Ali Khamenei died. Mojtaba rose, installed by the very IRGC his father sometimes restrained.
The IRGC is now officially a pressure tool for the United States, and the ceasefire price tag is public. History will ask one question above all. Did the architects of Operation Epic Fury have a credible answer to what happens if this does not end quickly? On day 13, Mojtaba Khamenei, wounded and unseen, has told the world, the Strait of Hormuz remains closed as a deliberate weapon against the United States. American bases across the region will be targeted. New war fronts are under active study. Revenge is owed for every Iranian life lost, and peace requires Washington to recognize Iran's unrestricted nuclear program, pay billions in reparations, and sign a treaty promising never to strike again. This is not a war approaching resolution. This is a war being positioned for a longer, more expensive, more unpredictable phase, for soldiers on the ground, for civilians under fire, for energy markets, for farmers planting next season's crop, for every family whose monthly budget is now invisibly linked to a 21-mile waterway in the Persian Gulf. If this breakdown helped you see the stakes clearly, please leave a like. It tells the algorithm that detailed, evidence-first coverage matters. Subscribe now. Turn on notifications. When Mojtaba Khamenei finally steps in front of a camera, I will analyze every frame. When those back-channel proposals receive a reply or are ignored, I will bring you the implications immediately. And before you leave, one question in the comments. Do you believe these three demands represent Iran's true bottom line, or are they a starting position that can still be negotiated down? And if they really are the bottom line, how does this war eventually end? I read every response. Stay sharp. I'll be back the moment anything moves.